some crime time and enjoy me going to the crime location. The videos that I add in this video are videos that were taken by me, so as you can see, I'm excited. So I may or may not I would like to do this again because this was a very interesting experience, just to kind of retrace his steps in a way. You know, this was over like 25 years ago, so a lot of things changed. So yeah, let's get into it. Warning, this video may contain details of graphic content. This channel is for mature audiences only. Some viewers might find this disturbing. Henry Louis Wallace was born on November 4th, 1965 in Barnwell, South Carolina, to his mother Lottie Mae Wallace, and his father is unknown. He grew up with a sister that was 3 years older than him, named Yvonne, and his grandmother. He grew up in poverty. The family had to drink from a pump well. Their bathroom was basically a shed, and they had to relieve themselves in jumper pots. His mother, Lottie, worked long hours as a textile worker just to try and make ends meet, and she spent very little time with her children. Henry's mother was very hard on him. She critiqued every little mistake he made, and she gave him very rough and severe disciplinary actions if he did not do what he was told. As a toddler, Henry could recall being potty trained. If he used the bathroom on himself, he was scolded. If Henry did use the bathroom on himself, he would hide his wet pants so his mother or grandmother would not find them. His mother would force him and his sister to grow up as quickly as possible so they were able to help around the house. When it was discipline time, him and his sister were forced to pick out their own switch so they could be spanked with it. When Lottie, Henry's mother, was tired from work, she would force Yvonne and Henry to spank each other. According to Henry, it was very painful to have to hurt his sister. During his elementary school years, he would see his peers get picked up and dropped off by their dads, and Henry wanted to know who and where his dad was. So when he asked his mother about his father, she told him to basically stop asking. But one day, when Henry was in the 6th grade, his father called him on the phone out of the blue and told him that he promised to stop by and see him during the week. As you could imagine, this promise excited Henry, and he was ready to see and finally meet his father. But unfortunately, that would never happen. He thought about this for the rest of his childhood. In 1979, Henry began high school at Barnwell High School. He was described as a very obedient child, and he was liked by his peers and teachers. Henry was elected as student council. His mother did not allow him to join the football team, so he joined the cheerleading team, standing at 6 feet tall, and he was the only male cheerleader. His cheermates described him as basically a gentle giant. He was very polite and had an upbeat attitude. After he graduated high school in May of 1983, he looked into pursuing a higher education. He first attended South Carolina State College for 1 semester. He transferred to Denmark tire store in Washington and pleaded guilty to second-degree burglary and was sentenced to 38 days in jail and 24 months on parole in Washington. After he was released from jail, he worked for a chemical plant from May 1989 to October 1991. Henry met 18-year-old Shonda Pattaya between 1989 and 1990. Some sources say he had a crush on her and wanted to date her, and other sources say they did date. Shonda was a senior at Barnwell High School and just months away from her graduation. Shonda and Henry had a mutual connection. Their mothers worked at the same factory and were friends. In March of 1990, she was reported missing. Several weeks later, on April 1st, 1990, her decomposing body was found in a pond by two fishermen. Henry was a person of interest, and he was questioned about her disappearance, but was let go due to them not having enough evidence to arrest him. 4 years later, he confessed to her murder. He wanted to confess because he knew her family. In November of 1991, he relocated from his hometown in Barnwell, South Carolina, to Charlotte, North Carolina. He worked at several fast food restaurants in East Charlotte. In the early 1990s, this is the Taco Bell where Henry Louis Wallace was a manager. It is located on Sharon Amity Road. Also, two of his victims worked here, Shauna and Audrey Spain. I will give more details about these women later on in the video. I'm sure in the early 90s, a lot of these businesses that surrounds the Taco Bell weren't even around. I did speak to a manager here and a couple of employees, and they were aware of the history of this Taco Bell. One of the employees said his niece worked here for 8 years and knew every detail about the case. This is where 20-year-old Caroline Love worked back in 1992, exactly 29 years ago. This used to be a Bojangles chicken fast food restaurant. If you aren't aware of what Bojangles is, it is a fast food restaurant that mainly sells chicken. I believe it is only located in North Carolina and Virginia. Caroline's last day of work was June 15th, 1992. She had not shown up for work for several days. Also, this is where 24-year-old Betty Balcom worked as an assistant manager in 1984. Betty not showing up for work was unlike her. She was a very trusting and reliable person. 2 women went missing from this location in a 2-year span. On June 19th, 1992, the manager of Bojangles restaurant contacted missed a couple of days of her work shift. He asked her to, quote, please check on her condition, end quote. Kathy rushed to Carolyn's apartment to find her furniture had been moved as if a fight had taken place, and there was a note left that was supposed to be given to her boss. Kathy contacted Carolyn's roommate, Sadie, to see if she had seen Carolyn, and Sadie stated that she had become suspicious of Carolyn's disappearance. It was not like Carolyn to not communicate with anyone for over 48 hours. Kathy and Sadie contacted police. Investigators questioned the Bojangles manager, and he said the last time he saw Carolyn was on June 15th, 1992. She worked her shift and asked to trade a $10 bill for a roll of quarters so she could do a load of laundry. Carolyn's cousin Robert drove her home, and he saw her go into her foyer. When police searched her apartment, her furniture was slightly moved, as if a fight occurred. Her bed sheets were removed. Investigators assumed that she had not did her laundry as she planned on doing, and the roll of quarters were not in her apartment. The search for Carolyn continued. She was filed missing. 2 years later, in March of 1994, her remains were found in a wooded area. She had been beaten and strangled. According to Henry's confession, this is what actually happened that night. Caroline's roommate, Sadie, was the girlfriend of Henry at that time. He stole a key to their apartment from his girlfriend. When he knew Caroline would be alone, he entered the apartment and hid in the bathroom until Caroline came home from work. When she arrived home, he demanded intercourse, and she denied, so he placed her in a wrestling chokehold, or as he called it, the Boston choke. He stated, quote, I kept the hold on her until she passed out, and at that time I moved her to her bedroom and removed her clothes, had intercourse with her, and at the same time I was still applying the chokehold. She began to fight, so I used a curling iron that was near her bed, and I placed the cord around her neck. After she passed, he folded her body in her bed sheets and placed it in an orange trash bag. He took the roll of quarters from her dresser that was originally supposed to be for her laundry. He dumped her on the side of the road. 2 days later, he returned and the body was in the decomposing process. He went back about a week later, and the only thing that was left was bones. On February 19th, 1993, Shauna's mother, Sylvia, came home from a long day of work to discover that her 20-year-old daughter had not returned home yet. Shauna's coat and purse were still laying in the dining room. She never went anywhere without her purse. Sylvia called Shauna's boyfriend at the time, Daryl, but he had not seen her at all that day. She then called the Taco Bell where Shauna worked at, but she did not come in. And yes, the same Taco Bell where Henry Louis Wallace worked at. Sylvia began to panic when Shauna did not pick up her godson from school, as she always did. Sylvia called Shauna's boyfriend at the time, and he came over to help Shauna's house to see if there was some type of clues as to where Shauna may have gone. When Shauna's boyfriend, Daryl, walked into the bathroom downstairs, he noticed that the carpet was soaked and the shower curtain was not tucked into place. When he went to fix the shower curtain, this is where he discovered Shauna's nude body laying in a tub full of water. Her head was submerged underwater. Shauna was pronounced dead at the hospital. She had lacerations on her skull and she had blunt force trauma to her head. She was knocked unconscious but was still alive. She had laceration markings on her neck. According to Henry's confession, this is what happened. Henry claimed he had no intentions of murdering Shauna. He only went by her apartment to chat with her. She just came home from school when Henry came by her house. He wanted to chat with her about a fight him and his girlfriend had. According to Henry, the comments she made he didn't like very much, so he put her in a chokehold until she passed out. He filled the bathtub with water, placed her in it, and took $50. 24-year-old Audrey Spain did not show up for her 2 work shifts at Taco Bell on June 23rd and June 24th, 1993. The same Taco Bell where Henry was one of the managers. One of Audrey's managers knew something wasn't right when she did not show up because Audrey was a very reliable person. She always showed up to her work shifts. The manager called Audrey's phone twice, but no answer. Audrey's sister attempted to call her as well. Audrey's manager went to Audrey's apartment to see if maybe she was at home. Her car was in the driveway, but no one answered the door. When a maintenance man entered Audrey's apartment and discovered Audrey's nude body sprawled across her bed, she had a t-shirt and a bra tied together around her neck. According to Henry's confession, this is what happened that night. Audrey just returned home from vacation when Henry visited her apartment wanting to smoke with her. After they smoked, he put her in a chokehold. When she blacked out, he had his way with her. He stated, quote, "She begged me not to hurt her, so I just had intercourse, and then I told her to stand up and put her clothes on. As she stood up to put her underwear on, that's when I administered the chokehold," end quote. After she passed, he stole whatever he could get his hands on. 19-year-old Valencia Jumper was a college student and had recently moved from Columbia, South Carolina to Charlotte, North Carolina. While in school, she worked at a grocery store called Food Lion. This is where that Food Lion was located in 1993. As you can see, it is now a high school. I remained in my car to film because I did not want to see anyone filming me at high school. I thought that would be a little suspicious and kind of weird. She also worked at a department store called Hex that was located in South Park Mall. On August 9th, 1993, someone walking past Valencia's apartment smelled a burning smell and then saw black smoke accidental fire. They found out the truth when Henry was finally arrested and he confessed. Authorities examined Valencia's charred remains, and it was determined that she had been strangled. According to Henry's confession, this is what happened. Henry murdered Valencia and turned the stove on high and left her to burn. He stated, quote, "Valencia was like a little sister to me. I don't know why I ever hurt her," end quote. He stopped by Valencia's house that night to chat. He said he needed someone to talk to badly. Valencia let him in. They chatted for a moment, and Henry told her to call his girlfriend Sadie so she wouldn't wonder where he was. Of course, this was all a lie to get her to turn her back to him. And when she did, he put a towel around her neck until she passed out. He poured drinking alcohol all over her body. He went into her kitchen and opened a can of pork beans and turned the stove on high. And then he went back to her bedroom, threw a match, and went home. 20-year-old Michelle Stinson had been murdered on September of 1993 and left on her kitchen floor. She was strangled and stabbed. Her telephone was ripped from the wall. Her body was discovered by her 1- and 3-year-old sons. They ran to a neighbor for help, telling the neighbor that their mother was, quote, "sleeping on the floor." According to Henry's confession, this is what happened. Henry went to Michelle's apartment just before 11 p.m. His intentions was to have intercourse with her. He asked her for a glass of water. When her back was turned, he put her in a chokehold until she passed out. He went to the bathroom, grabbed a towel, put it around her neck, and pulled as tightly as possible. If that wasn't enough, he stabbed her 4 times. On Sunday, February 20th, 1994, 24-year-old Vanessa Mack was missing. Vanessa's mother, Barbara, came to pick up her grandchild, Vanessa's daughter, so Vanessa could go to her job at Carolina's Medical Center. This is where 24-year-old Vanessa Mack was working back in 1994. It was called Carolina's Medical Center, but it is now called Atrium Health Carolina's Medical Center. When Barbara arrived to Vanessa's house, she discovered Vanessa's door slightly ajar, and Vanessa's body was found on her bed rolled up in a gray comforter. She was strangled, and Vanessa's 4-month-old daughter was asleep on the sofa, still in her clothes from the previous night. In May of 1982, Henry picked up 33-year-old Sharonance. She was a street worker, and Henry wanted her services. When she demanded payment for her services, he beat her to death and dumped her body by the railroad tracks. This was right before he murdered Caroline Love. On March 9th, 1994, 24-year-old Betty Balcom did not show up for her 2 work shifts at Bojangles, where she was an assistant manager, the same exact Bojangles Caroline Love worked at in 1992. Isn't it crazy how two women that worked at this same Bojangles went missing in a span of 2 years? Another manager attempted to call her several times but did not receive an answer. When Betty did not show up for work the next day, the manager knew something wasn't right and he contacted police. When police arrived at Betty's apartment, they discovered Betty face down on her mattress. She had been strangled with a towel that was still around her neck, and her body was extremely cold. She had been deceased for over 24 hours. Her car was gone. An entertainment center, ATV, and a VCR were all stolen. On March 9th, 1994, Brandi Anderson's boyfriend, Vanessa Woods, came home from work at around midnight. He discovered his 10-month-old son gasping for air. His son had a pair of shorts that were tied tightly around his neck. His girlfriend, 18-year-old Brandi, was found lying face down on the bed with a towel around her neck. He called 911 and proceeded to do CPR, but when medics arrived, it was clear that Brandi was dead. According to Henry's confession, this is what happened. Henry knew Brandi's boyfriend Sharonance would not be home. On March 9th, he came to their apartment, but when he realized his friend Sharonance was still home, he only stayed for a few minutes, then left. He left, and this is when he went to Betty's house and murdered her. Later that evening, when he knew Vanessa would be gone for work, Henry came back to Brandi's apartment. When she opened the door, Henry told her that he needed to drop something off for Vanessa. But of course, Henry had other plans. Once he got inside Brandi's apartment, he demanded for her to give him all of her money. He stated, quote, "We had intercourse, and afterwards she got on her knees and started praying because she was scared. And I said, I'm not going to hurt you. I said, give me a hug, and she hugged me, but I choked her out with a towel until she was red in the face and unconscious," end quote. Henry took her TV and stereo. Brandi's 10-month-old son began crying. Henry gave him his pacifier, and when that didn't work, he placed a towel around the baby's neck. He stated that he did not want to choke the baby. He just wanted the towel tied tight enough so it was hard for him to breathe. In 1994, this is where two of Henry's victims were found dead in their homes. I am going to assume it was Brandi Anderson and Betty Balcom, only because they were the only two women that were both killed in the same apartment complex. It is approximately 6 minutes away from the Taco Bell. Of course, over the years, the name has changed and the apartments have been updated. On March 12th, 1994, Deborah's mother, Lovey, came to her apartment to drop off some family pictures. When she arrived, she discovered Deborah's apartment was in disarray. All of the items from her purse were scattered around in her living room. She then discovered 35-year-old Deborah laying face up like the other woman. She had a towel tied tightly around her neck. Not only was she strangled, she was stabbed 38 times in the chest and abdomen. Deborah had just relocated from Atlanta, Georgia to Charlotte, North Carolina, just 1 year prior to this incident. She worked at a local grocery store called Harris Teeter and was a mother to an 18-year-old boy. According to Henry's confession, this is what happened. Henry went to Deborahs' apartment that night to see if he could do some illegal substances with her. She told him that she did not have enough money for that at the moment. Henry asked her for something to drink, and when she turned around, he put the towel around her neck until she fell to her knees. Henry said she wasn't like the other women. She was more feisty. She spoke up for herself, and he didn't like that very much. Henry asked her for oral intercourse, and she replied, quote, "I don't do that. You might as well go ahead and kill me," end quote. He tightened the towel while asking her if she changed her mind, and she didn't. He knew that Deborah always carried a knife with her, so he asked her to dump everything out of her purse. When she did, he kicked the knife away from her. Deborah hit Henry and screamed loudly for police. He tightened the towel around her neck and stabbed her about 20 times. Once he was finished, he wiped his fingerprints from the knife and put it back in her purse. He left to purchase the illegal substance and returned back to her apartment 20 minutes later to smoke it. When he left her apartment again, he stole a baseball bat, a butcher knife, and a coat. Deborah Slaughter was Henry's final victim. I visited the grave of Deborah Slaughter and gave my condolences by putting flowers on her headstone. I actually planned on visiting the rest of the victims' graves that were buried in Charlotte, but unfortunately I wasn't able to obtain their exact burial location from the cemetery's office due to the privacy of the victims and their families, which is completely understandable. All of the victims were somehow connected to Henry Louis Wallace. Detective Gary McFadden was a part of this case. During the 90s, Detective McFadden was a fairly new detective. In 2016, he was awarded his own show on the network investigation discovery called, quote, "I Am Homicide," that allowed people to see how he would solve homicide cases in Charlotte, North Carolina. He solved over 700 homicides throughout his career, and the show ran for 2 seasons. In October of 2018, Detective McFadden retired. Now, switching gears back to Henry, Detective McFadden started putting the pieces together. He discovered that Shauna Hawk and Audrey Spain were both Henry's employees at Taco Bell. Valencia Jumper was a good friend of Henry's sister Yvonne. Henry even accompanied his sister at Valencia's funeral and wished her family his condolences. Caroline Love was Henry's Vanessa 15 days later. Betty Balcom was a friend of Henry's girlfriend at the time. Brandi Anderson was the girlfriend of Henry's guy friend, Vanessa. What's even more scary is that Henry and Brandi's boyfriend, Vanessa, both worked together at two different restaurants called the Golden Corral and a children's arcade game called Chuck E. Cheese. When he testified at the trial, he stated that him and Brandi used to invite Henry over and they would laugh, drink beers, play cards, and listen to music together. Shonda Pattaya was Henry's crush and possibly ex-girlfriend. Deborah Slaughter was a friend of Henry. This is where Henry lived for a short period of time. According to a source, he was evicted out of this place, but the reason for his eviction is unknown. The Taco Bell where he worked was literally in walking distance of his apartment. Police found fingerprints on the back of Betty's car that matched Henry. During his confession, he said that he wiped down his fingerprints but forgot to wipe the trunk down. On March 13th, 1994, 28-year-old Henry was arrested. For 12 hours, he confessed to the murders of 10 women. He described in detail their appearances, what and how he did what he did to them. His trial was delayed over the next 2 years. During his trial in September of 1996, a psychologist testified and stated that Henry suffered from mental illness due to the abuse from his mother, and the psychologist wanted Henry to be sentenced to life in prison instead of receiving the death penalty. On January 7th, 1997, he was found guilty of 9 murders. On January 27th, he was sentenced to 9 death sentences. During his sentencing, he made a statement to the victims' families stating, quote, "None of these women, none of your daughters, mothers, sisters, or family members in any way deserved what they got. They did nothing to me that warranted their death," end quote. As of 2022, he has not had an execution date. On June 5th, 1998, Henry married a former prison nurse named Rebecca. So wait, as a woman, you marry a man that has not only forced himself on other women, but he killed them as well. She couldn't find any other man to marry. I'm all for giving people second chances, but it's hard to give a second chance to a murderer, especially since his victims could not get a second chance at anything. Anyways, I could not find an update on their marriage status. Henry is now 56 years old and is incarcerated on a death row at Raleigh's Central Prison. Rest in paradise to these beautiful souls. I hope their family has gotten some type of justice. I hope their family has somehow made peace with everything that has happened. Please leave some encouraging words down below just in case the victims' families come across this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I love you all so much. I appreciate all of the comments, all of the love, and I'll catch you all